Hi there, friends. It's Dr. Bill here. I wanted to share with you the most missed question in third grade and one way that I think it could help your students uh, based on the very low results. It just happened to be one of the questions called non-multiple choice, and it was a 2-point SCR, but an open-ended, short constructed response. And by short constructed response, they mean they want the response to be short. All they want you to do is teach your students to read the question, but to answer it not based on the question alone, but based on evidence. So if you think of the word tear, crying about these low scores on these short constructive responses, or the word TARE, it's an acronym that you can use: topic, evidence, answer, and response. TARE. Look at the topic, and then before you answer the question, the topic, go look at your evidence. Then you can answer and give your response. So the answer, answer, and the evidence is going to equal 2 points. And all you need is one complete thought, one answer, and one piece of evidence or more. The answer or the evidence equals 1 point. 1 point if you only have the answer, 1 point if you only have the evidence, but the answer doesn't match. 0 points if you don't have the correct answer, nor evidence. That would be 0. So let me show you. It's kind of difficult to understand how they score these, but the most missed question, this was question number 13 in third grade, and here's how it worked. You know, a short constructed response. It requires an answer in a complete thought and evidence also, and hopefully a complete thought. They won't count the grammar against your students unless the answer is I indecipherable, I illegible, or I incoherent. Okay. So this is basically how I feel or think that the point system works out when they show it to you on the itemized analysis report. The first percent that you'll see is how many got the answer only correct. 39% got the answer correct and got a point, red light. 40% had evidence based on the question and got a point, but the answer that they chose to write with it didn't correspond to that evidence or the question because it didn't tie everything together, if that makes sense. So they didn't check if the student had 2 or 3, because the rules in the scoring guide say you only need one or more pieces of evidence to support your response. Okay. 21% only were the ones that were able to correctly answer the question and provide evidence based on that topic in the question that had evidence and the response that all matched. So that's basically how the percentage broke down. So let's take a look down here. I believe in reading the question first and foremost. Red light. Read this question carefully, then answer the answer in the box provided. Okay. Give myself a little more space here. Says, what is the most likely reason the author wrote the article more than air? There's a question mark. So that question is in a complete sentence, red light. They want an answer to that complete sentence. But a lot of you are teaching your students to focus more on the question than on the evidence that they will use to write the answer to that question. So your students had to go straight from, and I'll write that down just so you can remember, whether it's tear or tier. Once they understand the topic, the reason for writing the article, they should go look for evidence, use that to come up with an answer in a complete thought, that first little yellow red monkey, and then they can state the evidence, the location. Now, before I show you this little acronym about that everything in an essay does tie together to make sense and answer a lot of questions, I'm going to show you first my primary folder when it comes to short constructed responses in English. What is the question? Notice that it's red. What is the response or the answer? Red. But it has to be based on evidence. Many of you teach your students to tell you where the evidence is, but it's the location of the evidence. And then they'll write that evidence either without or with quotation marks. That doesn't matter as long as they have the evidence. For those of you in third, fourth, and fifth who are having your kids test in Spanish, in my primary writing folder, you will see that. Respuestas cortas abiertas, open-ended short questions. ¿Qué es la pregunta roja? ¿Qué es la respuesta roja? Amarillo. ¿Dónde está la evidencia? You want to tell me where it is, the location. What paragraph of evidence are you going to use, even if you only use one piece? Evidence from the text for answer. Evidencia, what is it? Either with or without quotations, or these little tilde thing, these little, forget what they're called, but they don't really care whether your students use the quotation marks or if they use these little marks to reference that you're about to quote something. Okay. So if you can do one or the other, we'll think of red light, yellow light. But as you saw in my picture here, if you do one or the other, red light or yellow light, if you do both, we can call it a green light, that you have the answer and the evidence. For those of you that have the advanced folder, it's exactly the same thing. What is the prompt? What's the topic? What the question is focusing on, the reason that the author wrote the article. So what is the response or the answer? Based on evidence. Where is that evidence? What is the evidence with or without quotations? One or more evidence from the text. Complete thought. In other words, they have to attempt to write it in a sentence. How to get a 1, make sure they get an answer. How to get a 2, have the answer and the evidence. You don't necessarily, like I said, need to tell the location, but it would help the reader to, or the automated scoring engine to differentiate, okay, is this the answer or is this the evidence? When you do tell the reader where it is, what paragraph, what stanza, what scene, whatever, what line, it might be a good idea to teach your students to give the location and to give the quotations. Okay, so here's one way that I recommend that you answer, because you can tell based on these results that whatever was being done before doesn't seem to be working. Those are very low percentages. Okay, so if everything truly in a passage, or in this case an article, does tie together, teach your kids to look at the title that's on the top, to look at the topics. In other words, what did they name each paragraph? To read the introduction and to read the ending. By doing at least that, many of your students are going to be able to figure out the gist, or in this case, the reason that the author wrote the article. So let's try it. The title says More Than Air. T title. T topics. Talking without words. It brings groups together. A beautiful sight. That's a good thing. That's a positive thing. It gets you inspired. Well, in order to find out what the heck they're talking about, maybe your students need to read the I introduction to get a little bit of information. Take a minute to think about wind instruments. Flutes, trumpets, or tubas may come to mind. Long ago, beach shells and dragon-shaped tubes were used as instruments. Although they make a sound, music was not their only purpose. So that last point that they wrote there was that sounds that you hear have multiple purposes. And apparently, those purposes were being able to talk or communicate without words, that it could bring groups together, that it could be a beautiful sight, or inspire people. What's left? Well, let's read the ending, because sometimes what I call the socks and the shoes of a selection are what going to help us understand, just like how the laces, how does all this tie together? Instruments have many different uses, okay? And those topics mention some of them. Next time you see a wind instrument, think about what you would do with it. Would you rather use it to speak to others? What is speaking to others? It would be talking without words, communicating, or use it to tell a story. Okay. So the possibilities are endless. So that last sentence, once again, says there's lots of great things that you can use instruments for. Okay. So in order to have two complete thoughts, your students would then decide, which evidence could I use to specifically talk about why did the author write the 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 question said, why did the author write the article? Didn't say, why did the author write one paragraph? Why did the author write one sentence? Why did the author write that title? It said, why did the author write the article? So that's why I think that when you at least get your students who struggle with reading to read the title, to read all the topics called the main ideas of paragraphs, the introduction and the ending. It'll help them understand how a lot of it ties together. And this is for kids who don't have a lot of endurance. Okay. So we would need a complete thought. Okay. So apparently the author wrote this article. Here comes my complete thought with my mouth because it's easier to talk than it is to write. Shift. The author most likely wrote the article more than air in quotations to show that there were lots of great reasons to use musical instruments. Lots of great purposes. And so your kids could either use the introduction as evidence or the conclusion, paragraph 8. So if I was to use the introduction, my evidence sentence might be something to the effect of, in paragraph 1, it states, get low enough, that instruments have lots of different purposes. And if I was to choose the ending as my evidence, the students can say in the last paragraph or in paragraph 8, the author mentions that there are endless possibilities for instruments and how to use them in positive ways. Why did I say positive? Because getting inspired is positive, a beautiful sight is positive, bringing groups together is positive, and talking without words. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, but since all of these other ones were positive, it's a positive thing. And notice I didn't read the body paragraphs, even though this passage, this selection, this article was kind of short. I think the concept that I was trying to get across here, that just get your kids to at least read those portions, and it will help some of them who struggle with the endurance. Um, Even though it's 9 short paragraphs, or 8, I'm sorry, um, some kids just see that number 8 and get overwhelmed and frustrated, especially now at the beginning of the year. And an idea I would recommend, if you're going to teach the concept of tie, have your kids tell them a day or a week in advance, bring a tie, any cool tie from home that is either a clip-on or one that you could put around your neck, uh, that would be appropriate in terms of its decoration, or bring some shoes. And I would recommend they can bring non-matching shoes because the evidence could be from different places. But the concept is just make sure those shoes have laces so that you can tie things together in this essay and figure out what the question was answering. And so if you do have the answer and the evidence, your kids would have gotten the 2 points for this question, which 100 minus 21, 79% of the students were not able to correctly answer the question in a complete thought and give at least one piece of evidence in a complete thought. So there you have it. There's one way to do what's called, we'll look here at this part right here. It is a 2-point question, but it's not one of these non-multiple choice uh, responses. It's this one here, uh, using what I'm going to call the traffic light colors, the red light, the yellow light, and the green light if you do both. And the Spanish application of it and English application for students who need a dual language approach or to see something uh, in a similar way, but simplistic enough to be able to understand what is required in these types of responses. Thanks for taking the time to watch it. Take some time to share this with somebody and have a wonderful day.